Carlisle Select Board meeting on Wednesday, March 22nd. Our agenda includes community input at the beginning, and now we are adding a community input time at the end. So if something comes up during our meeting and you're listening and would like to make a comment at the end, you'd certainly be welcome to do that. Then we're planning to have an interview with Lieutenant Colleen Dunbar, who's the finalist for the police chief position. And then we're going to discuss or have presentations about 2 town meeting warrant articles that we may put on the town meeting warrant. And then we'll review the minutes and then community input and adjourn. And is there anyone either online or in the room? Maybe you could, if you're in the room and you plan to give community input, could you just raise your hand or let Ryan or give some signal to Ryan or Aubrey?
Yeah.
Is there anybody?
I'm not in the room, but I just have a question. When
Okay,
you get to me, no worries.
Yeah, hang on, John. Thanks. One
No
second.
problem, Barney. No problem at
Okay.
all.
Is there anybody in the room for community input? Okay, so then, John, is your question something you want to ask?
No, I just like,
Yeah.
there's two like public comment sections. Does that mean
Yeah,
I get to go twice?
Oh my gosh.
I got you, didn't I?
know.
No, I got nothing to say, Barney. I'm good.
Are you in
good.
heaven?
I have nothing to say tonight. I'm really excited to hear the interview with the prospective new chief of police, and that's it.
Okay, so that was John Lavery, Carlisle resident, and anyone else on the Zoom call that would like to make a comment during community input? Okay, seeing none, I will go back then to the first item on the agenda, which is to meet and talk with Lieutenant Colleen Dunbar. Lieutenant Dunbar, you want to just come up to the table there? And welcome to the select board meeting tonight, and thank you for joining us. And I'll introduce myself first, and then I'd like the other members of the select board to introduce themselves. So as I said, I'm Barney Arnold, and I'm the chair of the select board, and very happy to see you tonight.
To meet you.
David Modell, Vice Chair. Hello.
I'm Kate Reed, door holder extraordinaire.
I'm Nathan Brown.
So welcome, and then Ryan and Aubrey, I think, from the process of interviewing. So well, welcome, and we have your letter and your resume. We've seen that in our packet. And Travis, who's the 5th member, who I know from the screening committee, he is not able to join us tonight, but he's had plenty of time to review your qualifications. And we were very happy last week to get the recommendation from both the screening committee and the consulting group, and hear that you were, by far the outstanding candidate in this whole process. So I thought maybe I'd just start by asking you a question, just sort of a general one about yourself. From your resume, it's obvious you have tons of experience in public safety. And I'm just wondering what you'd like to share about, your life outside of your professional work.
So obviously, as you know from my resume, I started way back when I was 20 years old in college in the police profession. So I've been there forever. As far as personal life, I'm married. I have 3 children. 2 daughters who are freshmen in college. My son's a sophomore in high school, and they play sports. So I'm a sports mom. Usually I was a chauffeur. Now that they have their license, that's a little easier. So other than that, I have a dog. I don't like dog parks, so she's afraid of all the dogs. But so yeah, family life is really important, and again, sports, and that's about it right now.
Excuse me 1 second, Colleen. The sound from you is kind of low. I wonder if if we could do something to.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. If you, don't hesitate to speak, into the mic.
Okay,
That's
sure.
great. Yeah. And other questions from the select board members?
Um, so some of my questions may be just repeats of things that were in your cover letter. But-
Excuse me, Nathan, is it possible for you to speak a little louder? Or,
Can you hear me?
yeah, it's very soft though.
Mm,
I don't know if our Sean can help us
Hello?
out there, our technician.
So could you describe a little bit about kind of like why Carlisle and why now?
So, yeah, that's a good question. So a few years ago, our chief had left in Lexington and started the process of hiring a new one. At the time, we had some really good internal candidates. They went outside for candidates as well. And so I put myself in that process. At the time, I didn't get it. They went with our acting chief, which was great too. But I just thought, it's time. I've been in Lexington my whole career, and I wouldn't leave just to leave. I don't, for a chief's title somewhere. I haven't put in for a lot of jobs. I saw there'd been a couple in the area. I live in Burlington, so this is a good fit that it was nearby. I like the idea of Carlisle. It's a small town. I grew up in a small town, so been in Lexington a long time and dealing with that. But I do have some small town roots to go back to, and I really liked the connections that I had in the community. My parents were very involved in the community. My father owned the school bus company. My mother was a school nurse, so we really entwined in the community I grew up with, and I liked that connection that we have. And I think Carlisle is one of the places where you guys are unique, that you've been able to retain that character where so many other towns around have not been able to.
Mhm.
So that's something that really appeals to me.
Thanks. I don't know, Barney, do you want to go around or?
Sure. Yeah, Kate, you want to ask anything?
Do I want to? Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, because I have. anything
Okay.
to add.
Well, first of all, I want to welcome you. And what kind of dog you have?
Cockapoo,
Cockapoo.
not really a real dog.
Okay.
She's hypoallergenic. Gee, that's why we needed her.
She's not going to be a nuisance dog in
I
this
have a
town. We have a history.
I know,
Um,
it's a comfort dog.
okay, and I'm sorry I'm late because I had to drop my son at soccer practice, which is a long standing thing. So I'm very glad, I will say, that to be interviewing a woman, and I think it's long overdue that we in this town introduce diversity, gender and other. So I am interested in your view, I guess, of how police forces need to evolve, particularly with that lens. And I guess it's specifically here, perhaps through attrition, however, that happens, what your plans would be to recruit and retain a more diverse police force.
Right, and that's a challenge everywhere right now, nationally, in Massachusetts. I think as far as getting females more involved and up the command staff, as through attrition, as the last 20, 25 years, we've had more females. It's become more of, it was hard in the beginning to try to balance that family life and work, shift work and things like that. And I think being aware of that and being able to have the support system that we have, there's a woman in law enforcement from Massachusetts group that we never, that's really strong now. They're really working on women in law enforcement leadership training and things like that to try to encourage more females to move up the ranks. So I think that's definitely happening, and you'll see more of it, as we go. As far as recruiting and that's a hard sell. You have to try to find the right person for the job. You got to have to think outside the box. Like I said, go to the colleges, go to the community colleges and try to really sell Carlisle, like why this is a great place to work, why this would be a great fit. There are some really good opportunities right now where Fitchburg State College, a few of the other ones are actually doing academies. So they're going to college for 5 years and they're becoming out academy trained. So getting in there and trying to get one of those, it saves you the cost of of sending someone to the academy. And so those are the things that we really have to work on and trying to get our foot in the door in those places.
Yeah, so I agree with what you're saying. My daughter's in college shopping mode. We just went through that. We've been through it, but the last couple of weeks, and I was struck that criminal justice and similar law enforcement related majors are very popular. I mean, it's quite a lot of programs locally. So then just as a follow-up, assuming that, it means hiring a new grad fresh out of school. So give us maybe what you did at Lexington PD or just your own view of how you might take, you know, a raw trainee, like just an undergrad, a graduate who has no actual practical or limited practical experience and
So that,
make a useful police force member.
so absolutely. So training is so important from the beginning, from the academy on. Finding officers who are currently working in Carlisle, finding their strengths and having them be field training officers
Mm.
and getting the right fit, those people to do it. That's really what it's about.
To mentor the young ones, or what do you say?
Yeah, so someone's a field training. So when you get out of the academy, you don't just, okay, here you go. You know, it's usually a 6-month transition till they're out on their own in a cruiser. And even with then you have someone helping you, backing you up, things like that. So just finding the right fit for that is someone you really have to make sure you get a good field training program. As part of accreditation, there's very stringent field training standards that you have to follow and that you have to meet. So I think that's an important step to do. But again, it's just finding the right fit, making sure that they're in there, and training. Training is so important. There's so many opportunities now through the Municipal Police Training Council to get I mean, that's where you're going to get the training. Because you're not going to see everything. You can't train everyone in what's going to happen down the line, but that's important.
Okay, so I'm ready for my questions now. Have you been to see our police station?
I have not, no.
You haven't.
not.
Oh, what a
Yes.
wonderful
Yes.
surprise we have in store for you. Um, uh, Right now, we just had a master plan for the town, and one of the major pillars is sustainability. And one of the requests of the police department has been for electrified, or at very least hybrid, or an electric car. And we also always fight over how many cars per year. So I guess what I'd like to know is how you feel you're going to be managing. We're a wealthy town, but we don't have a lot of resources for many of the departments. Most of the wealth goes to the schools. So
Yes.
how do you do you feel you'll be?
So you'll have to, I mean, if you can't do obviously we're not going to do a whole fleet replacement of hybrid vehicles,
No,
which
that
would be,
wouldn't,
right.
that wouldn't have been contemplated, but
Yes. But making sure that you're taking that step that the next car that we get, I think it was fiscal year 2023, that there was another vehicle that was due to be replaced, make sure that's one of the Explorer hybrids that seems to be the most successful model that everyone's using at this point. A completely electric for being on patrol, especially in a town like Carlisle, is probably not the best way to go, just because they don't have the mileage and the batteries right now to sustain that. So I think the hybrid is the way to go. Lexington just started transitioning over to hybrid. We did get one full electric Mustang, which our school resource officer is using. But even that has come into challenges because not every school has a charging station, and we found out that none of them do actually. So, so it's things like that that you have to really think about. But the hybrids, and just going and just trying to get out there and, and replace as needed.
yeah. And then, but also there will be constrained budgets many years. So.
Yep.
Just so you know.
I know it's not easy.
Okay.
Colleen, I have another question for you. This is kind of looking at a much bigger picture. Given all of the reform, police reform, and sort of change conversations that are going on nationally and in our state as well. I'm wondering, what you think about the questions about loaded firearms and video cameras, whether police officers, whether all police officers need to be carrying a loaded firearm. And, even though Carlisle's a small town, I could imagine us, getting to the point where maybe some folks are really arguing for video cameras, or maybe the state, implements that. So what are your thoughts about that, discussion going on now?
I think actually body worn cameras, will end up being something that's implemented statewide eventually. Obviously, hopefully that would be as part of funding that they do that. It's actually, that's the best tool that you can have, is to have a body camera on the officers. It really shows the scene and what's going on. So it actually protects officers more than it hurts. I think it's a positive thing. And I think that's definitely the wave of the future. As far as firearms, it's it's a tool. You don't ever want to have to use it, but you need to have that. You never know when a situation is going to escalate. Obviously, de-escalation is what we want to happen. That's what training is all about right now, is to just try to de-escalate as much as possible, all the situations. But you need to have that tool. Firearm is something that a police officer does need.
Mhm.
And again, it's training, as you know, you're trained. You're trained not to use it as much as you are to use it. You're trained to, de-escalate, bring situations down, not bring situations up. So, that's just something that, especially now with police reform, it's being taught, and that's just, the way it is now. I
Mhm.
think it's a positive. I think it's a positive that is, having mental health training, crisis intervention training, things like that are all tools that people didn't have 30 years ago. And now that to have that, it's really, I think it's going to show some positive effects on policing.
Mhm. And what do you think about the sort of the national conversation about, the police culture and, I mean, in particular, people that may have been, serving as police officers for a long time, and the sort of the concepts you're talking about, the training you're talking about, maybe something that is not that comfortable for them, or they may not agree with. And I don't know if you've had the experience in Lexington of, trying to institute some of these changes, or to go, have your staff go through any of this kind of training, but I'd be curious to know how you might handle that. Let's say you encounter something here in Carlisle where there's not necessarily support for, the way you might approach it.
So I think, obviously the events were disturbing to everyone, everything that's been happening the last 3 years. One, it affects all police officers, even though it didn't happen here. That doesn't really matter. Obviously, people view it all as a all-inclusive thing. Massachusetts, I think we're ahead of the game, standards-wise, training-wise. We've always have been. That's why you don't see issues here that you have in other parts of the country. And that's lowering you can't lower your standards to hire police officers. You have to make sure that, again, I keep saying training, but that is what it's about, is making sure that you have a highly trained, effective police force. And what's the question?
Oh, about the culture and sort of addressing
Right.
people that may have been on the job a long time.
Yeah, and honestly, from my experiences, that doesn't happen here. You really don't experience that. And now you have a duty to intervene. It's the law in Massachusetts. As a police officer, if you see another officer doing something, it is your duty to intervene, or you could be charged criminally. No one would let it get that far. And if it does, I think, officers now are so aware of their surroundings and what they need to do that I don't think it would happen here. But if it did, you just need to make sure, again, policies and procedures are in place. Officers are aware of their expectations and go from there.
Mhm. One more kind of broad, high level question for you. I know you're just starting to get to know Carlisle, but I'd ask you to think about this in terms of Lexington, having been there for a long time. I mean, if you were to become the chief there, what would your vision be of sort of where you would want, how you would want to grow? That's not the right word, but what would you want the police department to look like? What changes would you be thinking about sort of over the next 5 to 10 years? What would be different from the way it looks now if you were the chief?
I think now it's quality of life issues, it's community collaboration. The main issues we've seen, obviously mental health is huge. It affects everybody. It doesn't matter how big the town is, doesn't matter how small the town is. So, making those connections, having clinicians that are available, because people need resources. And that's, when they're in an emergency, they reach out. It might not be a police emergency, but 911 is what they know to call. If they have no one else to reach out to, they're going to reach out to the police department. And you need to be able to provide resources and sort of make those connections and have answers or places that people can turn to is really important. I think using some of the funds that towns have been able to get through the opioid settlement and making sure you have mental health and substance abuse resources available to them that's a huge step. And I think we just need to continue that collaboration as it goes. I think, that's what towns are looking, they're not looking for, they don't need the warrior police officer out there. They want you to be able to help them and be able to be part of the community and not separate from the community. I think that's really important.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's certainly been our approach here in Carlisle, seeing our public safety officers as real people who support the community and the residents and provide a lot of important services in addition to public safety.
Barney, I
Any-
think
Yeah,
that Nathan had some more questions as well.
How would you describe your management style?
So I would say democratic is how I used to describe myself when I was running my patrol shift. I would, my door would be open. I said, I'd rather have a question. If you thought it was a dumb question to come to me rather than have it be an issue later on. So I like, participation that way. Having gone through some leadership training, things like that, the more you're trying to create a culture of connections with your officers to get that buy-in, because that's going to help down the line. So collaboration and some creative thinking and kind of making sure that, when the time comes, you're the chief. And if you need to make the hard decisions, I have no problem making the hard decisions, but you want to make it a participatory thing so that there's buy-in from the department and buy-in from the community. So how do you do that? And how do you present yourself is really important. So I think, in the beginning, I'm going to do a lot of listening and trying to see what people think the issues are, the officers from the community, from the department itself, and then, come up with some strategies to move on.
Kind of related to, I think partly your answer back to Barney, but I just want to get a little bit more specific on it. What do you, knowing Carlisle, what do you see as some of the challenges for this role in coming in?
So resources and, accreditation is an important step. I just know from experience, it takes a lot of work and it takes investment monetarily and time-wise. So you need to get buy-in from everybody, the community and the select board. If that's something that is important to the town, that we know that it's going to take time. And I know it's a little challenging with a smaller department, especially numbers wise. You can't pull somebody off patrol to do this, and so it's going to have to be a collaboration effort with some specific people who are experts. So the use of force officer, he'll be able to help with the use of force part of the meeting those standards, and the school resource officer will be able to help with that part. But so I think that's going to be the biggest challenge is resources and just trying to get everybody, to help as much as possible with the restraint on the officers and the budget.
I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for Ryan, but has anybody discussed like a transition period coming in and how long that would be and what would be needed to support our new chief coming in? And
Well, we'd have to finish this process first, but I guess I would turn it back to you, Lieutenant. What would your first 90 days be like if you were selected? What would you focus on first here in Carlisle? I'm kind of adding more detail to Nathan's question.
So, yeah, so like I said, meeting with the select board, obviously having meetings with you a week to try to figure out, what the most pertinent things are going. I know the interim chief is here for I don't know how much longer he has, but obviously try to connect with him and see what he's seen over the last 9 months that he's been here, 9 or 10 months. And
well, he hasn't been that long, has
has he been?
April?
Almost as long as me, so 7 months, 6, 7 months.
I'm fine, isn't it?
It does, when you haven't.
I thought it was September, right? So, and just come up with, so what needs to be addressed immediately? I know there's some staffing issues and things like that would need to be addressed and to move forward from there. But then, then once I get my understanding of what the department's looking for, what you're looking for, and what the town manager's looking for, start meeting with community groups and getting out there and trying to find what the town is looking for and what they have seen that's a good, positive from the police, negative and things like that.
I have a follow-up to that. We have a relative, well, compared to what you have in Lexington, it's a fairly small, police force here. And you talk about, meeting with community groups and with the town administrator and then with the select board. How do you see your relationship with the select board? And what would you want from the select board, and what do you think the select board should expect from you?
Well, I think obviously I'd be coming to select board meetings. I'm assuming that's part of my duty. And just, reaching out when there's issues going on, if there's something through the town manager, I'm not exactly sure if it goes through him first and then to you, I'd have to, I'll learn that, but obviously you're the ones who make the decision. So just having a working relationship that if there's something coming up, you can reach out to me, I can reach out to you, and just having a comfortable working relationship.
We wouldn't want you to come to every select board meeting. We wouldn't want to put you through
Right.
that.
Not required.
I'd like to ask some very granular and then a very wide ranging question. So just granular to help me. So how big is the LPD?
We have 50 sworn, there's like a 90 employees.
90 employees, okay. And you're what's the most number of employees you've directly supervised in that?
On patrol, so it's usually about 8 to 9.
To 9?
Now I have the detective bureau, I have 7.
So in that order. Okay. And have you had budget responsibility?
Grant writing, things like that.
Actual operational budget?
For the detective bureau, I write up what we need, and then we have some meetings and go over that, but not as a whole, the budget.
Okay.
And that's something I definitely,
You have
Right.
like Excel knowledge, and can you put together a budget? Do you know the mechanics of putting together a budget?
yes.
Okay, I mean, because a big part, here, I would say running a small department, obviously, so the HR piece is really important, which it always is, but the span of control is manageable, but, we run tight to the budgets, like we're very budget driven town. I mean, most towns are, but you're gonna be a lot closer to it, right? And we're very close to it, like we're very in the weeds on that. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Okay, so the broader question is, again, and it's a little bit unfair because you don't really know us yet, but given what you know about your experience in Lexington, and then you cited small town life and, the way we are, at least how you've observed it. Do you have any thoughts, like a long range vision on where you would like the department to be in 10 years? Like regardless of where we are now, it's not as much of a change thing as if you think about running a department, in 2030, like in the way you think about the way the world's working, what kind of a small town department do you envision?
I think the most important thing is succession plan and making sure that you're hiring and that you have employees who can move up so that, the next time you're looking for a police chief, you can go internally with one of your officers who has moved up, because that internal knowledge is invaluable, and to be able to keep that in-house, something to strive for. And I think that would be something I would definitely work on. I'm working on that. And I hate to keep saying it, collaboration and connectivity, but that's what you need with the towns. And I think policing is on a totally different path than it was, and making sure officers are trained in crisis intervention and that they're working collaboratively with civilians, clinicians and things like that. That's where we're needed the most. I think that's important. And obviously quality of life, Carlisle, the cut through traffic, I'm sure that's, something that's not going to go away. It's only going to keep getting worse. So just making sure that we're trying to keep the quality of life for the community.
Has anybody told you about the Carlisle Halloween traditions
No,
And
I
what's
haven't seen that.
Oh, well.
and what's expected of the police department? I'll
move the
just
date.
give you a heads up that Carlisle, when we have, Halloween here, it's a big to do in the center of town. And the police department being right at the center of town is always an active participant. So how are you in terms of, dressing up in costume, getting out there and chit-chatting with kids in costumes and not scaring them,
We
serving
always-
popcorn?
So we did Lexington Center. That was always a big deal. We had the kids in the center. They used to do it in the afternoon. So I'm used to that. I actually brought my dog last year to hand out candy in the center as we moved
Yeah.
to the news station. So I dressed her up. I didn't dress up, but I did dress the dog up.
Okay.
Could you tell me about a time and actually I'm going to rephrase this because Lexington's very close. And so there may be people who know people. But describe how you would approach conflicts within your team.
And every department has that. Every organization has conflict. It's, you gotta figure out how to make it work. If you just sit down and mediate and try to work things out, sometimes they want a police department that someone's not gonna be happy because you have to do things a certain way. And it's just the way it goes sometimes in the police department. But in general, like being a conflict resolution, that's what we do, right? We try to de-escalate all the time. So whether it's internally, externally, something you just try to work on and try to find a happy medium and that people can coexist and at least they might not love it, but make it manageable for everybody.
Do you have C4RJ in Lexington?
We do. We use the same program.
You
We
use the
have, we
same
have a lot of the same programs. EVSN, we're all part because Carlisle we're all in the same court system, the
Yeah,
Concord Court.
Right,
So
right.
I've actually known I was a prosecutor for a while, so worked with Carlisle prosecutors at the time.
Okay,
And
'cause I was in C4RJ.
yeah, so
Yeah,
C4RJ, the JDP, the jail diversion program that we have the grant. So I'm familiar with most of the,
Okay,
we
so
have it.
you're familiar with all that, have no problem with having it here.
I think Administrator McLean has some questions for you.
That's a fancy
I
title.
saw, well, you got a field promotion from Colleen, town manager, but I'm rescinding that field promotion.
Thanks for the confidence. I appreciate it. We talked about this in our interview and of course, when you went through the process, but Carlisle has some specific challenges in terms of accreditation. So I know you worked on that in Lexington. How would you approach accreditation in a place where the building constrains it? And then also, as you alluded to, the time that you would have to invest with a small force. How would you approach that if that's going to be a focus of yours?
it is definitely a focus, and I think trying to identify first, get the buy-in from the department. But so opening it up to a team approach and asking people to be involved is the best thing to do rather than just tell someone, tag, you're it. You're going to be handling the accreditation. Obviously, with a small department as a chief, I'll be doing a lot of the work. I'd have to look and see what they have right now for do they have any policies and procedures? Are they books? Is it electronic? I'm not 100% sure on that. But so it might be starting like from scratch with policies and procedures, which is fine. It's doable. That's what we did back, but it's time consuming. It does take a lot of time. So again, it's a team approach. You have to get, and I'm not going to sugar, it does take time and money. So if we can get that into the budget at some point, if that's something that the town select board really want, then it's something that will take some time and then we'll have to make it work. But I had I get a lot of people reach out to me, especially now with accreditation just switched to a new edition. A lot of towns that it was kind of always, you made it to that point, but then maybe they would let it slide for a few years until they were up, because every 3 years you're up for re-accreditation. So I think a lot of times some places let it slide. Now with this new 6th edition and there's new programs in place, you have to yearly meet certain requirements and things like that. So like a nearby town they just called me in a panic saying this is taking a lot longer. I'm like, I told you, you have to invest time into it. So it really is an investment that has to be done.
How about advocating for, and part of it is the physical space in the department, which you said you haven't seen, but you'll see there's going to be some constraints on accreditation. So how are you going to advocate to boards and committees and the public for the resources you need to accomplish that while understanding that there's not a lot of resources?
Just be creative and go out and explain, first try to explain what we need and what we're looking for. And then if we can't make it work by expanding spaces and things like that, how can we change things internally and make it work? I mean, our old building was not great and we were able to change a few things and make things work to get an initial certification. So that's the first step is certification. That's a little easier to attain than full accreditation, but depending on I don't know, I'll have to see how bad it is, to be honest. I'll know when I see it. I've been to a lot of departments though, so I've seen it all. Some really great ones out there. So really the buildings are bad. And so you just go with it.
So again, we talked about this, but I'd like the board to see how you think on this. We have part-time officers and full-time officers and the training requirements that's going to blend the differences between the two. I'm not sure you had part-time officers in Lexington, so how are you going to approach the management of that type of force?
So we are special police officers. That's the same thing. Everybody now has to do the same requirements. So if we're training our officers, if the Middlesex Sheriff's trailer comes out and trains it, you have to train the part-time officers the exact same way. So that's just making sure, and that's part of the state requirements now for police reform and for MPTC. So you just got to make sure that that's happening. Again, if they're a police officer, doesn't matter if they're part-time, they have to be able to do the jobs of the full-time officers as well. So again, with the training through the MPTC, which is a Municipal Police Training Council, their budget has increased and they have a lot of training out there that you can take advantage of, which is free for departments. So we've been utilizing that a lot as a training officer. I've been sending a lot of our officers to trainings and it's free. So it's great being able to do it that way.
So that's different than the bridge training then.
So the bridge training, once they're completed the bridge, they don't have to do that again. They just now have to meet all the yearly requirements that a full-time police officer does. So now that they all had to have met it, I believe they should have all met the bridge requirement by now.
I'll
No.
be relying on you. to-
Yeah, yeah.
Well, a couple of them were just too old. And
Right.
then, and a couple of them were at the beginning of the alphabet, or sorry, at the end of the alphabet. So they couldn't get in. So I've lost track of what's happened since.
So once if they haven't completed it, once they do complete the bridge, then they have to meet all the requirements, including the annual in-service
Okay.
training.
I'm not certain that all of our guys have been through bridge at this point, qualified.
Oh, my last question is, significant event happens, this is kind of a scenario based, but significant event happens in town. What are your priorities and when do you communicate with this board and me as to what's going on?
So I would note if it was a significant event, I would, notify you immediately by phone, let you know what's going on. And have you, if it was something that I was on scene and wouldn't be able to respond to everybody, I would have you notify the board. Then I would follow up with the email the next day or say, I have to meet in person if it's something significant.
I see Chief Soros is here. Would be okay, Barney, see if Brian has any questions?
Yeah, let me just ask one follow-up first before I forget it. And yeah, happy to have Chief Soros ask a question too. So I heard you mention in Lexington, and I may not remember the titles exactly, but it sounds like you have some officers or staff that are specifically assigned to, how did you refer to it? A community, what did you call it? A community health officer? You had a term for, and then you also, it sounds like you have another designated person to do maybe work in the schools. What I'm getting at is that with our size force, we don't have, the ability to have an officer who's, just one officer who's appointed to be, say, a community resource person.
School
Or,
resource.
how did you describe it in Lexington? Am I making sense here?
So we have a school resource officer, which every
Yeah.
department has to have a designated school resource officer. So I know we do
Yeah.
have one in Carlisle, but the community resource officer is a detective position that was specifically designed a few years ago. So yeah, so.
By that you did in Lexington specifically?
Yes.
Yeah. And what's that person's role?
So he, right now, he's the liaison. The liaison with any business. He meets the businesses in town. Does things like that. All our community groups. We also have a family service detective that he works with. So the two of them handle follow-ups with domestic violence calls and
Hmm,
mental health calls. And
mhm.
our family service detective has been working with the JDP clinician that we have assigned to us.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe Kate, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have, our force everybody tends to do everything pretty much. And so I'm just curious how you would approach working with a smaller staff to meet some of those needs. Kate, I don't know if you have something you want to offer before that to correct me.
No, well, we do have a school resource officer, but
Yeah.
like when I was working in the schools in Concord, that guy was, in the classroom,
Doing like the
once a
DARE
week at
program,
least, he
yeah.
was on campus. I'm not sure our school resource officer is on campus. Maybe he'll do a DARE program or something.
Right.
But they're not there,
Right.
on a
And
regular
that's
basis.
that's understandable. And, just finding, but if there's certain officers who someone's interested in so you can send them to some trainings for community relations, things like that, and they can help out when that happens. It's just kind of finding niches for
Yeah.
people and making sure that you have the right person in the spot. Because if you put the wrong person, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be successful.
Okay, yeah, Chief Sorrow, would you like to ask any questions or make
Yeah,
any
you do.
comments?
Just drag up a chair.
But so obviously you're very well qualified. I think that's great. I think the thing that would be as interesting and we're getting out of this is that you're a good fit. So I think that's great. I'm curious the size town you grew up in and kind of the feeling in that town between the police and the community.
So I grew up in Tingsboro, actually, not when it's a lot bigger now, but it was a little different, but it was about 7,500 people there. It was really, at the time, there was a police car on one side of the river and a police car on the other side of the river when I grew up, and the fire truck, it was on-call fire department as well. So used to that. It's different now, obviously, but growing up, you did have a connection, and the police chief in town showed up at every event. Everyone knew him. He'd be at the high school sporting events, cheering on the teams. It was a special connection, and I really enjoyed growing up in a town like that. And I think it's important to keep that community feel.
Mhm.
And Lexington does have that it's different, totally different. And it took me a while to get used to that when I went there. I was like, wait, but each community kind of has its unique value, and you just gotta find it and work with it and make sure that
Right.
go.
I would assume in the town you're in now that it's big enough that it's largely an office job being the chief. I would assume.
Yes,
Would
meeting. I think it's more meetings.
Well,
Would it be-
how would you see that in Carlisle? Do you see that it is largely an office job and largely meetings, or would you expect to see yourself in the field and?
It's small, so if something's going on, you're gonna have to be involved. You're gonna have to respond to the scene. And as a lieutenant detective, I have to do that as well.
Right.
You're on call. I get calls in the middle of the night.
Very
You're
good.
used to that.
Very good. I don't have any more questions. I'll be look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions or comments from the board?
No, I guess I would just like to be with you the first time you tour the building.
You guys, hey, listen, we're still in selling mode. Cut it out. Um,
I'm not, yeah,
I guess we're lowering expectations, so you'll be actually amazed how good it is. Do you pronounce your name McLean or McLean?
no, she does.
So it's
Renata
McLean I use my maiden name at work, so it's Dunbar.
Okay,
It's,
so
yeah.
we won't have a McLean
Pronounces it-
McLean
yes,
thing
it's-
going on.
Pronounces it Dunbar.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know
Good.
it's fine. I know it's confusing, but
That will help.
Legally,
give
it's,
some
yeah.
confusion.
Just go with
That will
Dunbar.
help.
All right.
Good. Well, then, if there are no more comments, I think we're all very happy to meet you and hear from you, and that you are, well qualified. And I think also I would agree with Chief Sarr is a good fit for us. It's good to hear that you grew up in a small town, and it sounds like you have a pretty good feel for what Carlisle life is like today. So, would somebody on the board make a motion, please? It's in your
Barney, you
packet.
and I were just in Tingsboro last Friday, you can recall.
Was that the,
The Yeah. I move that the select board vote to appoint Colleen Dunbar as the, do you want me to, Colleen Dunbar McLean, or just Colleen Dunbar as the Town of Carlisle Police Chief, subject to successful negotiations and professional background check.
Second.
All right, any more discussion? If not, then I guess we should make this a roll call vote since I'm remote. So all those in favor? Arnold, I.
Brown eye.
Odell, I.
Reed, I.
And Travis, it will be noted that Travis Snell is not in the meeting tonight. Well, congratulations. And we're very excited to have you. Yeah, and then I think just as one follow-up then, so in terms of the contract negotiations, I would like to see our town administrator and our assistant town administrator, and then I think it would make sense for Travis to continue on, since he's been the chair of the screening committee, to be part of that contract negotiation, if that's acceptable to the rest of the board. Is that fine with everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I don't think we need an emotion for that. We can just ask that that be done. Okay.
Not often
Excellent.
you go to interview and you're hired right on the spot, is it?
All right.
Great.
Excellent. Well, any closing comments? Lieutenant Colleen, I'll say Colleen, but we'll call you Chief in the future. Any closing comments or?
No, thank you for your time. Thank you for having me. I look forward to working with you all.
Excellent. All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
We'll make a play date for the dogs to get together.
All right. So let's see. How are we doing on our timing? Let me look at the
We're
agenda.
fine.
Oh, good. Is Peggy here?
Peggy is here.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent, Peggy. Well, would you
Peggy,
like
come
to welcome Peggy Wang, our town clerk? Would you like to come up to the chair there where the microphone is? Thanks. And yeah, give us your presentation about what you'd like to have on the town meeting warrant.
Thanks.
Oh, no.
Right here.
Another one, please?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Do you have one for the mosquito? Sure.
Oh, that's a Saturday closing.
Are you ready? Okay. I'd like to see put on the warrant for the spring annual town meeting to see if the town will vote to accept Chapter 51, Section 110A of Mass General Law, or to act in any other manner in relationship thereto.
Chapter 41.
41.
41. Okay. This article proposes that town offices will remain closed on any or all Saturdays as may be determined from time to time. The provision of Chapter 9 of Section 9 of Chapter 4 shall apply in the case of closing any such office on Saturday to the same extent as if Saturday were a legal holiday. So the motion would be move that the town accept Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 110A, and authorizes the town administrator to close any town office on any Saturday to the same extent as if such Saturday were a legal holiday. The reasoning behind this is that there has been a recent change to the legislation. The deadline had to register to vote for an election or a meeting or like a town meeting had been 20 days in advance of the meeting or an election. It was changed to 10 days. That meant if an election's on a Tuesday, the last day to register to vote would be a Saturday. According to the state, they've, given us this, to accept, this bylaw to accept, to move it so that we could have, the last day to register to vote on a Friday. Would move it up. Even though that would be in person, registering to vote, voters would still be able to register for an election up to 11:59 PM on Saturday on the state's, Secretary of State's website.
Okay.
By accepting this MGL, it would save the town the cost of opening offices on a holiday or weekend to hold voter registration sessions, exception of nomination papers, etc. If accepted, we have the option of opening on Saturdays if we anticipate a large voter turnout. By accepting this, we would not be disfranchising anybody from registering to vote. There are many venues today for people to register to vote, in person, by mail, online, and through the Registry of Motor Vehicles. So I'm asking that this be put on the warrant.
I'm gonna do a motion before we.
Uh,
or you're gonna ask?
Let's ask some questions then. We'll move.
So technically, it is on the warrant, so it's, you're hearing information for your
We don't need to
recommendation.
vote on.
Yeah, this is input for us. And then we can decide at the at our select board meeting on the 28th, when we're going through all the warrants, I believe. Is that the plan, Ryan? Yeah. Peggy, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. So this, see if I got this right. So this would mean for voter excuse me, for voter registration purposes, and there was as you said, there was an election on a Tuesday. The current legislation would require that the town hall be open on a Saturday, the 10 days before that, which would be a Saturday, to allow people to register to vote. So if
Yes.
we accepted this, then that would change it so that the Friday before that Saturday, so 11 days prior to the election, is the last day that somebody would be able to register to vote.
Yes,
Okay,
In
and it wouldn't
person.
affect
no,
anything.
in person.
Right, and it wouldn't affect anything else in terms of, if for some reason or other we were having, I mean, I'm trying to think of any other situation where we would, people
You
would,
no longer have to only be in person, right? Is what,
Right.
right,
two things changed, right? One is over time, whatever time. One is winning many more options, including remote options to register, right?
Yes. Be
So
able to-
that's changed. And then the second thing is they recently gave us basically 10 more days for people to register.
No, 10 less days.
right.
Had
They
been
went from
20
20 to
days.
10.
So you have more days, right? Because you have up to 10 days prior, right?
Right, but before you had up to,
20,
You're
which
right,
is
you're
fewer
right,
days.
you're
So they
right.
added more days, right? So in the 10 or 20, doesn't matter, but in the 10-day example, there would be 2 Saturdays, right? There would be if it was the Tuesday, it would be a Saturday and then the following Saturday. So you're not required to open either of those days then, right?
that's correct.
And now today you do have to stay open in that run up, just in case somebody wants to come in?
Yes, and I have twice now, I think, for it.
Okay.
Can I ask about, it says under the reasoning, I'm a little confused, but if the 10th day prior is a Sunday or holiday, you would go back to the 11th, 12th, or 13th day before the election. I'm confused. I get the 11th day, but I don't get about it.
11th day's a Sunday, and then maybe 10th is a Saturday, and then maybe Good Friday or whatever the holiday is.
But I have to admit, I took that directly from the,
Okay,
what I got from the state.
Point is, you don't go, it's no less than 10 days, right? So if use Peggy's example, if Tuesday is,
David, can you speak in the mic, please?
sure,
Thanks.
I'm sorry. If the election was a Tuesday, and you back it up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then if the 10th day is a Saturday and you say, or let's say,
Right there. That part
Let's say
I
the
get.
10th day is a Sunday and you say, well, we're not, let's say the 10th day is a Monday and that's like a holiday.
Yeah, that would make more
Now
sense.
you go to the Sunday and you're up, no, we're not open Sunday. Now you go to the Saturday, oh, we're not open Saturday. Now you're at the 13th day, but it's
Right.
never going to be like 8 days. You can't go the other way.
Okay, got it.
But we started at 20 and
Yeah.
we're never going to get to 20. The
Right,
worst
and you
case
can
is
still
like
go online
13.
and Do it anyway.
And anyway, you can go online. So I think it's a nothing burger.
Okay.
So, Peggy, I totally get the voting reason for doing this. I just want to make sure that I understand kind of the key of what's being done here. So it's not really that Saturday's closed. It's closed because it's declared a legal holiday. Is that right? It's because it's a legal holiday that allows it so that we don't have to open for the voting?
That's the way the law is written, yes.
Okay. Because we could, we're often closed on Saturday anyway. So it's the fact that it's the holiday that makes this change. And if we were to open on that day and any employee were there working it, would we be paying time and a half holiday pay?
I don't know.
Okay.
We, who does the registration are those from the Board of Registrar, and they're not paid.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yet.
I'm sorry, $25 annually.
I guess I have a question for Ryan then Ryan, do you see any ramifications for Saturdays being, if we close it, right? We don't have to declare it closed. But do you see any ramifications for Saturdays being a holiday?
For Saturdays being a holiday.
Yeah, like an official, like as if it was a federal holiday or any legal holiday.
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay.
Because we wouldn't be required to pay holiday pay to somebody that came into work that day for some reason. Or I don't know, maybe it
That was
doesn't-
my question.
Yeah,
Again, I'm the one who would be sitting here and I don't get
Right.
holiday pay. And if it's me and then a registrar, they're volunteers.
I was just wondering, anybody else that might come in and work that day, are they working on a holiday?
It depends on the employee. So if they are salaried, then not necessarily, but maybe. If they
Mhm.
are a wage employee, then it depends on their total hours. Should they be paid that way? Probably.
Do we have anybody who is regularly working here on a Saturday?
That's not
Outside of
in
Peggy.
town hall, right? Besides Peggy, which I think needs to be addressed and in full support of. And then our public safety officials,
That's a little different.
that's outside of
That's a
town.
shift.
okay. And so tonight, this is for informational purposes, correct, Ryan? And so we're gonna wait till next Tuesday, or could we go ahead and say, yeah, we approve it being on the town warrant tonight?
So it's already on the town warrant. If you,
Okay,
you accepted it as a potential warrant article, you can remove it if you choose to. You will be talking about recommending it at your next meeting. You can do that now.
I
but
see,
typically your
right.
practice is to see it first and then.
got it. So it's to, right, for us to understand it better. And then next Tuesday, when we go through all the warrants where we're trying to take a position as a select board, that's when we would be voting to recommend it or not. Okay, that makes sense. Then I think if there are no more questions of Peggy, we know what it is, and thank you very much for the presentation, and we can move on to Aubrey's bylaw.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thanks, Peggy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy. And we got quite a bit of information in our packet on the changes that Aubrey's talking about. I'll turn it over to you, Aubrey. Thank you.
Yes, so as I presented a while back, as the bylaw and the personnel policies both stand, there's a lot of conflicting information of whose authority it is for, what charges. And
Excuse me, Aubrey, it is a little hard to hear you.
all right, can you hear that better now?
Yeah, if you bring it as close as you can, that's good.
Hold on, let me just move the mic this way.
look at you and speak at the same time. There we go. It's a little bit better. All
Thank
right,
you.
so yeah, so as I mentioned, there's a lot of conflicting information. Also, it was found that, the personnel board had a hard time meeting, so it wasn't very effective in getting HR issues put forward, job descriptions and everything. So I propose that with this warrant, we would eliminate the personnel board. I was asked after the last meeting to reach out to them. I did get some response and said that makes sense because they were unable to meet in a timely manner.
You
So
got a response from former
one of the-
personnel?
the only one member responded. I'd have to look back on, but yeah, so they understood. So that was, so that was a good response for me. So with the documents that you see here, the personnel, the bylaw would eliminate the personnel board. They had a previously appointed a lot of authority to the personnel administrator. I did remove that part as well and added that as a town administrator charge under the personnel bylaw part. I did have some discussion since then of possibly just having the bylaw refer to the personnel policies, so then we can focus more on the policies themselves having all these charges, because there are some other things that we would want to add to the policies themselves. The other document with the policies also show a more streamlined version of authority. And in my memo, it shows that I tried to condense these authorities to one person, some parts select board as well, and obviously the town meeting would still be in charge of certain parts. So any questions that you have, I'm happy. And I know Barney, that there was a typo in one of the ones to make sure that the personnel board is still not referenced in the bylaw.
So, yeah, I thought I knew it, and now listening to you, I got a little confused. So I see that, let me go back to the first document. So this, sorry. The hell, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I'm further up. So you have sort of three documents. Well, you have three documents here. So you have a memorandum, that's your summary, right?
Yes, yeah.
You've redlined your own summary, which is weird to me, but why?
So what that is showing is what I have eliminated in the
Okay.
authorities. So what's
So
been
you-
crossed out is
what you've
now
eliminated.
they no longer have that authority. So that's.
So it's not really a markup, it's just a convenient way of showing it.
Yeah, it's how I thought it would be organized.
So, and then in that discussion, you said, you referenced, well, it's clear that you're eliminating references to personnel board
Mhm.
in both the policies and the bylaws, so that makes sense. But then I got a little confused about, I see that you created sections to clarify what the authority of the TA is,
Mhm.
which also makes sense. But then you said, well, maybe it doesn't have to be that granular in the bylaw, it should be parked in the policy.
Mhm.
That's the part I was not ready to, I can't.
So that can be a conversation for right now, right? So what that should really look like. I think there's an agreement that personnel board should be eliminated. The section that was for the personnel administrator, I did move to the town administrator to make sure that they had that authority. But there is conversation of, does it make sense to have all of that in the bylaw itself? Or if that would make more sense to have it in the policy, just in the policies, to just make sure there's no further conflicting information between the two documents.
So what's your thought on that?
My thought would be to refer to the personnel policies to make sure that everything is streamlined, everything makes sense, it matches. That would be my recommendation.
So I just
Which
want to
would mean-
clarify. Are you
yeah.
just saying that you would not then put the 15.4 in?
Correct. I would eliminate the town administrator's charges in that and make sure that that's in the personnel policies of what he or she has charge of.
Okay.
With the thinking that the policies could be changed by the select board. And if it's within the bylaw, any changes would need to go to town meeting.
Correct. So so that would make it so it's also streamlined because, in today's climate, we need to make sure that we're keeping up to date with all the necessary requirements. Government has really changed a lot. A lot of towns are moving in this direction to give more authority to town administration to be able to take care of the personnel issues and policies in place.
Mhm.
So then instead of having to wait for town meeting every time there needs to be a change, the select board and the town administrator can make those changes.
And so more broadly then, I agree with that as a good approach.
Mhm.
The broader question is, should we really be going, not now, but should we be going through all the bylaws and sort of eliminating duplicative references and making sure that the meat and potatoes sits in the policies and make a very sort of spare bylaw? Or
So I think that's a larger conversation of what we want to look at with all the bylaws. I would say,
And this is this particular thing is urgent because
I wouldn't hold this up for that. I'm just, but
Right.
if we're gonna start down the, I like
Mhm.
to understand where we're going with precedent,
Yeah,
right? So
right.
if we're gonna adopt that philosophy, then
Mhm.
we should be going back through and streamlining the bylaw and parking the detail in a policy, right?
right. Yeah.
Maybe there's no policy exists. We have to create, right? You may look at one of them. I haven't looked at all this
I
stuff.
think it depends, right? A lot of stuff makes sense to stay in the bylaws, obviously. I think that's important for town meeting to have that
Right.
say. I think, but personnel issues is a very fast-paced
Yeah.
environment, and it's more modern now that, things need to be managed in a quick way and not every 6 months or 12 months.
Hmm.
But this would help with that.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to
Um,
understand.
Aubrey sorry, go ahead, Nathan.
So you're talking about the entire 15.4 and only the 15.4 would become a policy?
Yes, so that's correct. I think 15.1, 15.2, and 15.3, we might need to review as well, but we want to make sure that it's allowing the personnel policies to run.
And the reason why we would do that is because we think, because we could task the town administrator with things not on this list to do it.
Mhm.
But we're worried there might be something on this list that we don't want the town administrator to be doing.
Not that we don't want the town administrator to be doing, but if we have any change in the near future, we'd have to wait to go to town meeting with the bylaw.
Well, I mean, I think there's two
These are all
different,
Pretty general things, though. I'm just trying to. We're just thinking about it now, so.
So we can just keep it as is. So part of my task was to eliminate all these different authorities. And so at the point, right now, the existing authority is this personnel administrator that's appointed by the personnel board. And since we're eliminating the personnel board and we want to make sure the town administrator has that authority, I did move that so they have the authorities that personnel administrator had. And so it just goes straight to them instead of going through this personnel board.
Mhm.
So that's where that is. So it's confusing because I kind of sound like I'm throwing a wrench in all this by saying there's another option, but we can just have it that way if that makes you feel more comfortable. But I think that there's other charges that we want to make sure the town administrator will have down the line. And if we're going to put all these charges in there, we'd have to add it again and get another bylaw approval. For example, if we wanted to make sure that evaluations were part of the routine annual process, that needs to be in there. And who's in charge of that.
So we can't add things without it being in the bylaw. We can't create a policy.
oh, we can.
that-
So that's what we're trying to
asking.
do. Yes, so that's what we're trying to do is make, if we made it so,
No, with this in here,
sure,
this is in here.
Mhm.
And you were just saying if there's something else we want them to do.
Mhm.
Can we do that by policy? Or does
so
it
that's
have
the
to go
issue,
in-
right? If it's conflicting with the bylaw, I don't, Ryan, if you wanted to say if there's anything, if this shows in the policies that they have this charge, but then it doesn't in the bylaw, that's kind of why we are at this point right now, right?
I mean, I think there's three things going on that we should be cognizant of. So one is whether it's more flexible to put the detail in a policy. Now, flexible can be looked at two ways. Some people could say, well, wait a minute, you're removing the ability for the town to vote it. You're giving more authority to like us to just change policy without having to go through the town. But okay, so there's a philosophical debate about where to park this stuff. I think there's as the son of a lawyer and a husband of a lawyer, accused of thinking like a lawyer, there's a good drafting policy that says you try to avoid getting yourself into a pickle where you might have conflicting things. You want to try to draft as cleanly as you can. And I think what Aubrey's saying is it's much cleaner if, and that's why I asked the question earlier, if we take a position that gradually we're going to move the more detailed stuff into a policy, we avoid having the bylaw say one thing and a policy say something else and all that. The third thing, though, which is also hasn't been mentioned yet, is, but it's part of our move, is to clarify and detail the role of the town administrator, where it was silent or ambiguous before. And that was something that the governance committee made a point of, right? So regardless of whether it's in the bylaw or in a procedure, enumerating what the town administrator's responsibility is clarifying, number one, but also is part of a move to get us out of the weeds, right? If we formally designated the TA to do these things, if it's not said, it's kind of up to us, right? A lot of things. So it moves it more clearly moves those day-to-day decisions into the hands of the TA. So those are three different things. They're not all in conflict, but they are three separate things.
But I think your third one there is dealt with whether it's in the bylaw or a
It
policy.
doesn't matter where it is.
Right.
It's just get it out of our
Right.
hands, clarify it. So you start with that. So let's start with that. So you say, okay, if we agree, right, we've mostly agreed on that philosophy. Let's clarify their job, and therefore it's not our job. If we've listed that it's their job, we no longer have to get in the weeds in it. We've clarified that's their job. Then we say, okay, should it be parked? And there's a good debate to be had about whether it should be in the bylaw or should be in the policy. I'm just saying, if we go the route of doing this, we should be consistent. And so if we start down that path, we should.
So
Yeah.
15.3 looks the way it does now, because June before last, Barney and I brought
Yes,
this bylaw. And 15.3 used to look like this 15.4 with all this policy stuff in it.
Yeah.
And it didn't match the policy. So we said, let us clean this up and have 15.3, which says, look at the policy, folks, because that's where you're going to find all the all the stuff you need to know. And so I would not be thrilled to recreate what we just got rid of.
And that's great context, absolutely, as to, why to continue to make sure to refer to the policies. And so,
Yeah.
then, yeah.
And then I think, and the policies are just either easier to draft, they're easier to
Right.
follow. Everybody has a copy on their desk. It's a little different than a bylaw.
Right, but 15.3 is policies or bylaws. It covers both. But yeah, Brian.
Nathan, let's take a swing at this. Your question's a good one. So we're a statutory town, meaning the state constitution gives power to the state. The state then lays out mass general laws. The town has never stated formally it wants to change any of that. The only way that it can is through bylaws.
Mhm.
So the bylaws govern as long as the MGL is silent on it, or you're allowed to change the bylaw. So it's not a problem because the select board has given sort of some authority to my position, but there's one particular case that I think is anecdotal and interesting with the Board of Assessors. So the Board of Assessors, the chief assessor is appointed by the select board, but the assistants are appointed by the Board of Assessors by mass general law. It's just an oddity. So when you go to appoint one or the other, the reason the assistant didn't come before you is because that's a Board of Assessors. Chief assessor gets appointed to you. In all of these instances, the personnel board still exists. So the board could say, by bylaw, we have to go through the personnel board. But your policy doesn't say that. It says or the town administrator. So we did go to council and they said, well, if you have 3 different versions, you can pick. But that's not the cleanest way to do it. So the towns, when they really want to clarify, they pass a charter that says we're amending state law to exist this way in structure.
Mhm.
Or you go with the bylaw route and say, where the state law is silent, here's how we want to exist. So the real question is, how do you want HR to be run? Because even if you did take away the personnel board and all those other items, because mass general law still exists, I still wouldn't have authority over anyone who's statutorily appointed by a board or elected official unless you do a memorandum or some type of agreement,
Even with this in this,
even with that. So this would take away a level of ambiguity for the appointments of the select board because you would decide to invest authority in me or not. Then a town administrator bylaw would further cement that. But you would have to go the one step further to have a town-wide conversation to say, here's how we want all employees to be, and that's a much bigger discussion.
so so I'm not sure I understood all of that exactly. But one of my key questions was, I've always been under the impression, and when I read this, I'm completely supportive of the way it is here now, just to be clear. But as I read through it, and I read through those town administrator items in the bylaw, I was assuming that that's the baseline. But we could, as a board, either through policy or request, grant you more than what's in there through the policies, but this is the kind of the baseline bylaw. Can we, what I think I was hearing was, we can't do that. We would have to go to town meeting, not to add to here, but to add like within a policy to grant other things.
So you can do anything it's silent on. You wouldn't be able to conflict with what it says. If you wanted to do something different than what it says, you couldn't. But if it's silent, yes, you can add duties. So any power that you have, you can give to anybody.
Right, okay.
But you're introducing yet another level, which is, let me see if it's silent or we've specified, granted you the authority in the bylaw level, we have the authority to make policy changes. But let's say in the case you just mentioned, or in the case of an employee like the assessor, the assistant assessor, if we wanted to grant you that authority and take it away from the chief assessor, whatever the title is, that would be through a bylaw or not at all
You
possible?
would have to amend state law.
State law. So as it stands then, any employee appointed by an elected board or any board?
Depends on the elected board, depends on the board, how it was created. So if you accepted a general law to create something like the Conservation Commission.
Yep.
Then the Mass General Law speaks to how that employee exists. And it says that the Conservation Commission, which is appointed by you, then gets to appoint their employees.
So it takes it away from us.
It takes away the appointment, but you appoint the commissioners.
Right, but you would not administer that person.
No.
And same with health agent.
Health agent is Board of Health by statute. By
So
statute.
there are certain employees, no matter what we do here, that you would not have, and you mentioned schools mentioned here. There's certain employees in the town that you would have no authority over, no matter what
No director.
no matter how we do this.
Correct.
But
But
would
right
they have
now,
to
there's-
adopt the policy like of a review, let's say, or a step or whatever, there are some things here. Testing programs, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of things you guys list, right? That if we adopted a personnel policy that said, everyone has to wear red on Wednesdays, like, would those people have to wear red on Wednesdays also?
No.
They would not. There's no authority through there's no bylaw or policy that we, the select board, could enact, or the town could vote, I guess, to change the independence, if you will, of those employees. Right?
Well, you could pass a charter or a
Charter,
state
yeah.
law amendment. Yeah.
So.
All right, so I think we should go back though to the substance of this one.
Yeah,
Kate,
I-
go
I-
ahead if it's on that.
This, notwithstanding, though, I just need to clarify again what Ryan said. It says all town departments and positions shall be subject to the provisions of this bylaw and policies adopted hereunder, except elected officers, that's us, right?
What are you reading?
I'm reading 15.3. Elected town officials and employees of the school department, okay? Employees with personnel contracts and employees covered by collective bargaining agreements will be subject to provisions of this bylaw and adopted policies to the extent that these provisions are not superseded by or contrary to any contractual term or condition. Nothing in this bylaw shall be construed to limit any right of employees pursuant to Massachusetts general laws. And that's what we're talking about, that,
That's
that
incomplete.
those,
That's incorrectly written.
so I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is it, does this not hold then? We can't, this does not give us the authority or give you the authority to evaluate all department heads.
No, because of that last sentence.
However,
No, it's not even the last sentence also, but I think it's in the first sentence should include elected officers, elected town officials, employee of the school and appointments of those. I don't know how it's written. I don't want to
Boards.
wordsmith it here, but the
No,
boards
that-
have authority to appoint or otherwise hire employees who are town employees, but are not subject to this.
however,
That was not edited.
however, there is a lot of, so there's two steps, right? This is gonna solve the first level of clarity issues. There's people who still say, well, we have to go to the personnel board for this, even though the town has decided to move on.
And
from
you
that.
get,
Yeah.
So this would speak when it can and clarify when it can.
Okay.
The next conversation, if you even want to have it, which is just a big if, is how do we want to further organize the town? It's a much bigger discussion. So that's passing bylaws or state amendments that would give authority.
Yeah.
So this is worth doing if you want it to be clear. Will it solve every nuance? No, but there's also indirect authority, there's budget authority. There's all kinds of, so
Yeah.
the classification plan says if you pass it the way you can, you would get a step increase if you were evaluated. So I believe the employees would want to be evaluated by someone in order to do that. And then that's where you can have some indirect authority into that process. But right now, we have several different things speaking about how HR is done in the town. And by the way, we've introduced another variable in a HR director that we need to clarify.
Right.
So it should be select board when it can, gives authority to the town administrator if it wants to, who can, when they want to, give authority to the HR director.
Right. Okay, and I think the goal that we need to state is that we'd like to professionalize the operation of town hall. And one way of ensuring that it stays on a professional track is to have adequate HR and evaluation all the way down the line. And that, no departments are kind of like left out of that process.
So and I just would like to say this on behalf of the employees, there is that instance where you want to control your employees in order to have them perform the way the town wants them to perform. That is one function. But it also goes the other way. There are some employees who are not being taken care of the way some other employees are because they do not fall under the general umbrella of HR. The town clerk is a prime example. She is an elected official. She is not, her authority comes directly from the state and reports to no one except the voters. So how she's handled in an HR sense is something that I'm very interested in working out with her so that she's on par with everybody else.
Yeah.
So there's the employee side of it as well. It's not just direct authority. It's also how we take care of, retain, and make sure our employees are whole.
For every, for every good deed, there's another deed lurking about. So in the case, again, I'm back to the case of employees who are like the assistant assessor, employed by or hired and presumably managed by someone appointed by us or whatever. I forget. I've lost the mechanics of it. But if that person, maybe that person does want to be evaluated for step change or, merit increase and says, please, I want to be part of the system. And you say, okay, but then there's a disagreement about whether it's the assessor's evaluation or your evaluation. I mean, you're building in issues and I'm worried that we're not fully thought through all these things. So from my view, I'm completely in agreement to strike the personnel board references and get them out of there so that there's no ambiguity on that front. And I'm trending now towards thinking maybe the way Kate is at 15.3 just ought to be cleaned up a little bit. There's a little wordsmithing that might need to be done in 15.3 just to make sure we've captured those other employees who are not really, I don't see them identified. And then just leave this whole TA thing, like the fall is when we're going to do all this, right? Aren't we taking up a bunch of this governance stuff in the fall?
Well, but that whole 15.4 can go in the policy.
Well, we can do that anytime. We
That's
don't
right,
need a town meeting to
I'm
do that.
saying we don't need town meeting.
So I'm sorry, I didn't say it right. For the town meeting,
Yes, okay.
I would not have 15.4 right now. We may want some little version of 15.4 someday, but I think 15.3 needs a little bit of cleanup, but it's nice and broad. And we can then think through the person.
And I mean, it actually did, when we did this, what we wanted it to do. We
Yeah.
took all that garbage. We took 6 pages out of the bylaw. Because it was, some of it was reproduced in the policy and some was kind of like, it was reproduced, but they had lots of errors. They didn't jibe. So that certainly, and okay.
So that's great. So that means, if you want to adjust 15.3 a little bit, but from there, if we don't have 15.4 in there, then you
Right.
can just refer to the policies and then the whole personnel board section and that appointed personnel administrator is not even necessary at that point,
Right.
and we can just take that whole section out.
What happens to 2.3?
2.3,
3. Number 2
2-3,
Page 18.
in the bylaw.
page,
Yep.
in the bylaw. Maybe the policy,
I have it
Page 18
that's in the policy, I think.
on the policy.
administrative policies.
So we don't need to, the policy does not have to accompany a warrant on the bylaw, right?
Yeah, so that,
I didn't realize I'd gone down to a different document.
oh, yeah, so that's the,
Yeah.
policies, but, that will also eliminate.
It all gets eliminated.
I told Aubrey if she wasn't in there, you would have demanded it.
So have we sort of reached a conclusion? It sounds like we have, that we're gonna remove all the references to the personnel board, and we're gonna remove the red line section that was describing the TA duties. We're
Yeah.
gonna remove that for now, and then we'll come back to revisit the TA and any other sort of bylaw questions for the fall town meeting.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
but also to answer Nathan's question, 2-3 would be then also added to the bylaw,
Yeah,
to the
it's not even
policy.
Part of this discussion, right?
but I just caught myself in something. So I think though, and we can separate the two motions or whatever, but we should at least amend the bylaw. I'm sorry, we should at least amend the policy to remove the reference to the personnel board
We're
so
also,
that ambiguity doesn't lurk.
That's true, yeah.
We
so-
can't wait till the fall. What I'm trying to say is
Correct, we should do
we
that
should not
now.
wait till the fall to clean up.
Right.
And
That
we can
part.
decide if we want to pull 15.4 in.
So,
Change
We
that.
don't need town meeting, but I don't want it sitting there where there's
Right.
another reference.
so I will say, so like with the military leave policy, we are collecting amendments that we are putting in, and so we can have one larger amendment this summer because we are fixing up the policies as a whole. So that will be one of them as well, is this will be added to,
so you're talking about policy.
yeah, to the policies, not the bylaws.
So the bylaw.
Yeah.
So going back to the bylaw, we would eliminate the personnel board and that's it.
And not have 15, whatever.
As long as you're going to the revision of the bylaw, I would encourage council to take a fresh look at 15.3 and just make sure it says what we wanted to say.
Agreed.
Because I always try to think of what may go wrong. By not having something in our bylaw, are we by default accepting some mass general law regarding personnel policies?
So I'm not a lawyer, but that would give you your general authority. So you would get to decide.
Okay,
Select board has the executive authority in town. So if it's silent,
okay, so we don't automatically come under some,
no, the.
sometimes the bylaw, I think, gives us power that was the mass general law.
In this instance, you created an HR department by bylaw using a personnel bylaw, a volunteer committee, and then this concept of a personnel administrator. So it was to fill a void in town government that you didn't have.
Unfortunately,
Like a lot
people
of-
didn't come with it.
So as you progress and hire, HR professionals, et cetera, you're looking at old vestiges of ways to do this without staff.
Okay,
You can always build it again if you need it. And the way a lot of towns do this is instead of imbuing authority into the personnel board, you allow the town administrator or the assistant town administrator to create advisory boards that help them make HR decisions, whether that's, members of the board or public, et cetera, so that there's community buy-in without needing to say they have to vote on it, meet, and it can't make a change without them. So we would never do anything without community input. It's just how you do it.
Okay.
All right, we comfortable with this?
I know you
Okay.
have to go, Barney, right?
I do. So thank you, David, and I'm going to turn it over to you to finish up with the last few bits on the agenda. And thanks all week. And so we're on for next Tuesday night for our regular meeting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, have a good rest of
Good
your,
time.
Thanks, everyone.
rest of your week. Great. So we don't need to make any motions on this either, because it's already there. So shall we move to approving minutes? Barney left me.
The select board vote to approve the regular meeting minutes of February 28th, 2023 as presented. And move that the select board vote to approve the release. Oh, no, that's executive session.
Yeah.
I'll do that separately.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Roll call vote?
No, we don't need
We
any.
don't need, we're all here. Barney's gone. We don't need a roll call.
Oh, we don't, even though she was here enough. Okay.
Nope, she's,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. All right,
I move that the select board vote to approve and release the executive session minutes of July 13th, 2022 and September 27th, 2022.
one of them I thought certainly could be released. The other one was-
We voted on it in executive session.
we did.
We've already agreed to do
We
this.
did.
We're just
Okay,
doing it
that's right.
publicly now.
Okay, got it. Second,
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Let's see, we got anything left on the agenda?
community.
Community input, aha. We now reopen the session for community input. If anyone, since there's no one here, is anyone remote? Well, Cecile, I guess as a citizen, you're welcome to input. Or if anyone on the virtual meeting wishes to raise their hand. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move, we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Right,
Okay.
very good.